I haven't got many slides and they're not in any detail. So I think it would be probably more kind for yourself if you have the slides same size on one side and me on the other. There's only about 7 or 8 slides. For me, I'm a filmmaker and I'm also an imposter academic. And I'm purporting to know something about communication, but you will have to judge that for yourself. And my presumption is that I'm talking to scientists, engineers, and industrialists who are wanting to sharing their new knowledge and ideas. So this is about communication, because it's obvious that communication is really important in this project. Now, I want to show you some barriers to understanding I've come across, and they'll be embedded in stories, real stories. Okay. And I think about the audiences you will have. They will either be other nanoscientists, and you all understand each other, so I have nothing to say there. Other scientists who are not nanoscientists, and I have some stories to tell about that. People with no science, and I have a story to tell about that. And people who have a rigid opinion on your topic that you have to interrupt with, and I'll say something about that. Okay. First of all, this is me as a young man and my friend Malcolm Haynes. Now, Malcolm became professor of high temperature physics at Imperial and ran the department there until sadly he died a couple of years ago. But he was my friend and we did a lot together. And I used him in a particular way. I was running a course for teaching senior scientists how to communicate. And one of them on the course was a lovely, tall Irishman who looked a bit like Sean Connery. And he was a botanist who ran a research department, research station for the Irish government. And as an exercise in communication, I wanted him to play the role of a journalist, phone up a scientist in a completely different subject area, find out what he did, and write a piece, write a 300-word piece in a newspaper. And he had a telephone, and so he rang up, and I gave him Malcolm's number. He rang Malcolm at Imperial, and they chatted, and they had half an hour. And I was watching. And Reagan was really, at the beginning, very affable, and he became stiffer and more worried looking and so on. And then he wasn't writing. He had a pad and a pencil like every good journalist do. And he stopped writing, and then he wrote, and then he said, thank you, Professor Haynes, and came over to see me. And he said, your friend, he said, Professor Haynes, he is a charming man. And he did his very, very best to explain to me what all this stuff about high temperature physics and plasma is, he said. But I didn't understand a word of it, not one word. And then he said, but even though I was trying to politely tell him that I didn't understand, he kept on and on. And then I had a brainwave. I said, tell me, Professor Haynes, I said, how could we convey this to my 10-year-old son? And he said he immediately switched. And for 10 minutes, he gave me enough stuff that I can write this stuff. So that's good. He said, but I've learned a lot about being opaque to other people. Well, I thought that was interesting, and I thought I would ask Malcolm's side of it. The phone was still there, so I picked it up and I said, Malcolm, how was Prof. Reagan? And he said, oh, he was a charming man. And you know, he said, he understood every word. Huh? Really? I said, yeah, he understood every word. Okay. Now, let's just think about that for a bit. Because Malcolm is a good teacher, and he didn't realize he was being totally opaque. And he loves his subject, and I think he thinks it's wrong to oversimplify, wrong not to use the most precise language he can when trying to convey his subject. And I think that in some ways is a bit limiting. Because when I am looking for people to put into a television program that I'm making, I need to know that they are thinking about the person they're talking to. So when I go and sit with them, the only thing I know about is just how intelligent I am. I don't know much about them. And I use that intelligence as a measuring stick to see how they react to it. So I'm with an academic, and he will say something about ribosomes, and I was a bit puzzled, and he would say, have you heard of amino acids? And I would say, oh yes. Then he would go on, and he's gradually feeling my brain. I get that sense in order to pitch his explanation at the right level for me that doesn't lose too much. And that is what I regard as a very good communicator, somebody who is working to understand the mind of the person they're talking to. I wish Malcolm had that skill. Maybe if he had it, I can tell you that I've met many prize winners, Nobel Prize winners, and they nearly all have that skill. And maybe if Malcolm had had that skill, he might have won a Nobel Prize. Anyway, the moral is know your audience. Language is a terrible barrier as well as a tool of precision. And I just want to reveal a bee in my bonnet, which I'll come back to. It's slightly crazy. I don't know if it's true or not. But Reagan made it successful when he asked Malcolm to do something, to act, to help explain to a child. And I think asking someone to act is very important. Let me tell you another story. This is a story about Manuela. Manuela was a PhD student in the course I was involved in. I was one of the 13 academics running it. And part of this course, which finished about 2 years ago, was training in communication. And one of Manuela's jobs, one of her conditions was that she had to make some cooperative venture with somebody who wasn't a nanoscientist. And Manuela had made a special paint in some way I don't understand. She put nano properties into it, and it was a specially black paint that didn't exist before. And she came to me and she said, I want to make a project about this with an artist, but I'm new here, she's Italian, I don't know. Can you help me find someone? I said, sure, it's easy. I said, my granddaughter is an art student. Well, not an art student, she's done several degrees and is now finishing her last qualification at the Royal Institution. No, I don't mean the Royal Institution, that's science. I mean the Royal Academy. And the Royal Academy is the most upmarket art institution in England, that's right, in Great Britain. And she was there in her final year. So I said, Manuela, to Eva, this is Eva, meet Manuela and see if you can work something out together. Now, they're both feisty ladies. They both were feminists and they were both ambitious. So I was waiting to hear from Manuela. What happened was Manuela put on her very best Italian clothes, trotted up to London. She was at Sussex, went to see Eva, and they spent some time together. And nothing happened, to my great surprise. So I asked Manuela what was going on. And she said, well, I explained to Eva what was special about this paint, and she just didn't get interested. So I asked Eva what it was like. And she said, look, she came to me about this new material, she said. And she said a lot of stuff I didn't understand, but I know what I want from a material. I want to touch it, I want to smell it, I want to work with it. I want to do enough that the material talks to me. I have to get involved with it, all right? This is a completely different culture from being a scientist. I think Manuela probably said, look, I have this paint, it has these little structures in it, it drives these electron movements and the photons, etc., and band structure and so on. As like two completely different cultures, like two cliffs on each side of the English Channel. And as far, I think it doesn't have to be like that. Doesn't have to be. If Manuela had a bit more experience or thought, she should have realized that it's no good her sending information to Eva. She needed to create a situation where Eva would come to her to reverse the information flow for this to work. She needed to ask Eva something like, look, I have this special paper. How could we cooperate on this? What would you like to do with it? And then Eva would have said, well, I look forward to so and so and so. And it would have started, the information would have started going backwards and forwards like that. Now, my bee in my bonnet is that the key was asking Eva to do something at the end of the listen anyway. And I want to go on to a completely different audience, and that is politicians or non-scientists in authority positions who have a bee in their bonnet about something, or at least they think they know something absolutely, and you have to deal with that. People committed to a hypothesis and not open to change, like immigration is a good thing, or should markets and free competition be a way to guide society? Yes, that's what it should be. Or the UK's got to leave the common market and become a great power again. Or the climate crisis is not real, it's happened before in a geological record, shows it just happens. Well, let me tell you another story, which was important to me. I was asked by Cambridge to explore why in their history faculty, they were giving twice as many first-class degrees to men as they were to women each year since the 1950s, with almost regularity. It's been 20 or so male firsts in the history results and about 12 or 9 female firsts in the results. And so they were trying to understand it. And I found that and got involved in making a film about how they were trying to understand it. I was quite shocked by what I found, actually. The history course is based around a student writing 1 essay per week throughout the 6 terms. And the essay is something which the tutorials happen weekly, regularly, boom, 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 all through, and they're all fixed. And on one tutorial, the student is given the topic, like, what did Cromwell do that was positive when he deposed the king? And then they have a week to read everything that they can and then present their essay for an assessment and shredding the following week when they get the next assignment, and so it goes on. And the quality that they are looking for, and they all understand this, is that they need to find in their reading and research something original to say, something that's sexy and a bit risky, and something that they can fight for and defend against any attack. So we're filming a tutorial, and in this wonderful medieval building, and the room was just beautiful. A Bukhara red carpet on the floor, deep leather armchairs, stainless steel windows, the oars that the academic had rowed for Cambridge with 40 years before, up on the wall. It was, And in this particular one, there were 2 students. There was a young woman sitting in this leather armchair, a young man sitting in that leather armchair, and the academic leaning back, relaxed. And every time the girl tried to say something, the young man interrupted. He would say, oh, yes, well, that's very interesting. Have you read what Hoskins said? Hoskins disagrees with that. And he'd carry on. And then when she tried to say something else again, he'd say, oh, yes, But listen, that's an old, and it went on. So at the end, he had spoken, this rather uppity and spoilt young man, as far as I could see, had spoken for 90 minutes, and she had spoken for 10. No, I mean 90% of the time. And he had spoken, she had spoken for 10% of the time. So they went out, and as I was packing the gear away, I said to the academic, do you mind if I say something? He said, no, please do. So I said, well, look, I think you missed, I don't think you handled that very well. The girl had so much to say. She put such effort into it. She had very interesting questions to ask. But the boy, who we also found during the week, you saw he had actually very little penetration in what it was all about. Why did you shut him up and let her speak? And he said, you know, come back next year and you'll see that she will walk all over him because she will learn how to fight for airtime. I said, but that's crazy. I said, you know, surely you're after the truth. And your students, I don't see them go to museums. I don't even see them look at original documents. I don't see them go to archaeological digs. And he said, no, he said, they're not after the truth. They're learning how to argue, and they're learning how to fight for the airtime that they need, keep other people out of the way, and justify what they want to do. And with that skill, they will go into parliament, they will go into the civil service, they will go into the senior levels of management, and they will run the country. Well, I was upset by that, really, because I thought it's not when you come across a new idea, asking yourself, well, that's interesting, you know, from what I think, could there be another approach? A scientist, I think, should always think, you know, well, that's an explanation, but could there be a different explanation? Whereas here, the idea was, this is what I believe, and this is what I would justify till the bitter end. And I can understand it. Politicians need to have some certainty. They need to be able to say to their public, I believe in such and such and such and such is the important da 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 da. And that is why we are giving 60 billion zillion pounds to do that, that, and that. So it can be disastrous, this way of thinking. When COVID came and we had Boris Johnson in charge, who is a history graduate, I think, and from a big public school, and it was very important to actually get the country locked down. And the epidemiologist from Imperial, Neil, was trying to convey to him why he needed to. But I think the only thing I can, you know, think about this is that Johnson was thinking of the pattern of diseases caused by something parallel, let's say, to motor car accidents, where you can get 32 one week, and 14 the next day, and 12, 3, and so on. And I don't think he had in his mind the idea of exponential growth or function. And probably that's what Neil Ferguson was desperately trying to get him. And it wasn't until 2 weeks that Johnson went in for a big lockdown, but he allowed on purpose, he allowed 2 huge events, a huge horse race, 7 horse races in the around Cheltenham to happen. And I think it was a big music festival to happen, because he said he didn't want to interfere with individual freedom. That was what he believed in. And as a result, about 50,000 people died, because it just spread from those 2 events like anything. So it's important to know how to deal with this. And that's what I'm going to try and deal with in my last story. Is this all right? Is this the sort of stuff you want to know?
Oh yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yes, because remember this morning, Annie, in her talk, was saying people don't understand exponential growth. So I'm glad you mentioned it again.
All right. This comes from a film I made a long time ago, about 1975. I'm sorry it's so old as an example, but it's my best. It's one of my best films, not the best, but almost best. But anyhow, I was called into the office, and the guy who runs Horizon said, "Look, Ed, look, this is a newly developed microprocessor. They've just released this, and I got this one because I want you to make a program about it." And I looked at it on Simon's finger, and I said, "Look, it's small, isn't it? Yeah, it's 5 millimeters across," I said. "Very small for a computer. That's taking a minute. Now, what the hell do I do with the next 49 minutes? Because I can't think what else there is to say about it." And he looked crestfallen and said, "Well, if you're not interested, I'll find somebody else." So I said, "All right, I'll go and do something else." A week later, I put my head around Simon's door. I said, "I hope you haven't given that film away yet about them." He said, "No. Well, I said, "I really want to do it. Let me do it." He said, "What's changed? What is it?" He said, "Look, I said it doesn't matter that it's 5 millimeters across. What matters is that it only costs $5. And in a society where we've been having computers costing 20, 50, 100,000 pounds for these great big rooms full of, to be able to put $5 worth of computer into everything, like from fridges to cars to, it's going to revolutionize our country." And I think it's a trick. "All right," he said, "go and get on with it." Okay. So that's what I did. And there are two parts to this, which maybe have some parallel if you were trying to tell somebody about a new nano sensor. Because the first thing I believe is you have to make the technology feel real. The person who's reading about it needs to have a vision or a sense of what it would be like to touch, what it looks like, where the wires go, what goes into it, and how it behaves, what's it reacting to, and how does the signal get out, and those kinds of things. So the first part of the film was about microprocessors, and I showed how they were made, how the layers were put on with photoresist, and then a coating, and then the next one, and bits dissolved away, and what's over there. People got the structure they could see because it was filmed down microscopes, the way these things were built and where the different semiconductors were in the structure. And then by putting the wires on, you could see how the signals got in and out. And you could see the way in which pulses moved around, because you could film it in such a way that where there was a potential, you got a green light, and so you saw the thing going. And went on, and I think that made it real. And then I had to make the other part real. Now, what I'm saying with the whole message of this bit is that examples are the key. Examples are powerful. Examples are what people remember. Examples are what people hang the explanations that they might get on. And I always found if I was in a bus next day after a program of mine had gone out, you could hear people occasionally use the examples you put in the program, and that's how they talked about it. So I needed to find examples of where this technology would make huge changes. Being quick about it, through the point of sale terminal, it was obvious that these things could collect all the stuff that the whole chain of supermarkets had sold and send that information to the automatic warehouses that were, I'm talking about 1975, so this was all incredibly new then. Resupply their things with very little in the way of people involved there, where these were replacing armies of bookkeepers, people keeping track of all the stuff coming out of all the tills, making these paper rolls into big orders and then sending it back to where it got, and so on. And the other sort of idea was these computers would go into small things like typewriters and things like this is typing pool. Maybe you're all too young to have seen them. But before typewriters were automated, all typing was done on paper by rows and rows and rows and rows of women. I mean, the BBC would have had a floor like this where everything was being typed. And so with ICI and so with government, everybody. So that was two ways of showing that there was going to be a very big change in the way people were employed in Britain. Then the next idea by examples was to show how quick and fragile it was. So I was showing the way the clockwork industries, the Swiss who made little clockwork watches, the way this industry had died in 2 years once the chip watches came in. I wanted to really convey through an example the fragility of the world once the computers would start hitting it. And then I wanted to convey something which was an idea that people, I don't think, wanted to have, that there were human things which were going to be mechanized, and the people didn't want, I don't know, but I think there was generally a feeling that people thought there was something essentially human that couldn't be mechanized and so on. So I was looking for something that would put a spoke in that. And I came across a wonderful physician, Dr. Peck, in a hospital in Pittsburgh. And he was, I don't know, 55, brush hair, very sharp spoken, and supposed to be one of the best physicians in the USA. And he was working to automate all he knew. We're filming him sitting at a desk with two medical young doctors with him, busy taking notes, and a computer man there, and they were creating an expert system. Peck would say, well, let's get into livers. You're feeling a liver, what are the possible symptoms? They say, right, let's write those down. What are the ways that you might feel something? So if that is going to be a liver, this, you'll do a differential diagnosis by taking the blood and looking for this and so on. So I think you're all familiar now with the idea of an expert system and a huge decision tree starting from all different pains that someone might come in with and how you go about going down that tree. And we filmed a man in a bed who'd come in who had some disease, and the young doctor went and said, I want to feel your stomach, or I want to look in your eye, and he had those things. And then he disappeared to a computer terminal, put it all in, and said, well, now it could be hardened arteries, you need to feel this and look for that. So he went back and said, I need to feel, and he did this, and did that, and so on. And so he got to a diagnosis. And that really caused a lot of attention. And then there was another example I wanted to give, which was difficult, which was the sort of industries that would come in now to replace the ones that were going. And these were people who were building applications around a little computer. And what we had was a group of Englishmen looking very English in Wall Street in New York, selling to the American traders new kinds of screens to go up that would give them an enormous amount of information. And they was, here they were talking to the Americans saying, what do you want on this screen and how do you want it to go there? Because what they had before that was really basically not much more than a telephone and a television camera looking at some kind of thing in the stock exchange. And through this, the idea that with a $5 computer, you could build something that you could sell for roughly $500,000 to people like the American stockbrokers. So So I had this film now, which was very powerful, very powerful. And I kind of like authority. You know, it would be quite interesting if I put that on the box and it went out in my, you know, wanted it more important. So I rang the office of the Minister of Science and Industry, who was a guy called Gerald Kaufman. And his PR lady came on, press lady came on, and she said, yes, Mr. Goldwyn, what can we do? I said, look, I'll explain that what this thing. I want Gerald Kaufman to see it and then to make some comments about it. She said, I'll talk to him. And she comes back and she says, I'm afraid Mr. Kaufman is not really wanting to see your film. He doesn't think that semiconductors are all that important. I said, what? She said, he doesn't think they're all that important, but he will look at he will give you an interview if you like and make some comments about it. And I thought, I don't want that. I'll end up with, you know, we're staying up at night and we are wondering what to do and this, that, and the other kind of stuff. And I just put it on the cutting room floor, and I don't like getting embarrassed by having senior people if interviewed and then not in the film. So I wasn't quite sure what to do. I was walking across Hammersmith Bridge, which you won't know, it's a bridge across the river in London, an old bridge. And I was worried. And I was looking out, and coming towards me was a number 209 bus, red double-decker bus, and the driver was laughing. Wow. He's not worried about this stuff. And then I looked across the pavement, and there were all these people walking towards me. He's not worried, and she's not worried. He's not worried. I'm the only one that's worried. And I thought, that's it. That is what the program is going to end with. So the way I ended with the program was to say, these things are happening and they were all illustrated, and you couldn't avoid them because they were examples, you know, they weren't to be arguments. And I listed the questions that this raised about Britain's industrial strategy, what people would do, what the exports were going to be in the future, and so on. And then I ended the film with these words said very strongly. I said, no one in government is talking about this. The questions shout, I said, but the silence is terrifying. We've got to talk about the future. That was the end. Roll credits and all the rest of it. About an hour later, the Prime Minister rang and he said, could the BBC supply him with several copies of the film? He wanted to show one in the House of Commons next day. He wanted one to go to Gerald Kaufman, who will be asked to make a report to the House tomorrow. I know that he sent one to ICI, which was a very big British company. And it was on Norwegian television, it was Australian television, those I know, and probably many other places. So it was a very successful dissemination. What are the lessons that come from this, really? One is you need to make the technology real so people can have a strong creative sense of it. Second is you need to think very carefully and get very precise examples. And the third thing is, that this is my bee in my bonnet, you need to tell the audience what they need to do. So think of the barriers and bypass them. I've got one extra thought before I finish. I hope I haven't been too long, but anyway, I've been talking about it as though what you have to do is send information out to the industrialists and other people. I would recommend you think of creating a situation where the information flows back, and it's two-way communication, and that will be richer. Anyway, over to you, and thank you.